Danger Zone.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. My name is Kev Baker, and you're tuned in to the Kev Baker Show, coming to you live on truthfrequencyradio.com. Another good weekend has passed there. My batteries are recharged. Looking forward to another hectic week right here on the show. Another week of live shows lined up, of course, for all of you great people out there. But I'm just one part of this team that makes up KBS, and I've got my co-host, Mr. Johnny Whistles, with me as well. And Johnny, you done absolutely brilliantly on Freaky Friday the other night, brother. I hope you've had a good weekend, man.
Thanks very much, Kev. Yeah, I had a great weekend. Spent it with Junie. I like to keep off, like yourself, Kev, I like to keep off the Facebook and things at the weekend, give us a clear mind. And it's great because I had spent some quality time with June and June's wee grandson. So looking forward to the show, Kev. The Monday night show is always a great one to start the week.
It really is. And, you know, just quickly, I mean, that Facebook thing you were talking about there, I used to be so engrossed in it, John. Really did. Posting my every movement, letting them track me all the time. But as I've kind of pulled back from Facebook with the health issues and stuff like that, it's only when you start using it less that you appreciate just how engrossed and enveloped you become in social media. And there's something quite toxic about that. There really is. We can probably do a show on that in the future. But tonight is Monday night, and of course we're joined by basically the third member of the team here on KBS now on a Monday and a Wednesday. We've got Anthony Patch. And for new listeners out there, Anthony has his own show here every Friday, 10 p.m. in the UK, and that's 2 p.m. on the West Coast, 5 p.m. on the East Coast, the Anthony Patch Show. He's the author of a number of books, including Covert Catastrophe, 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, Revising Reality, and he's also the editor, chief writer, and dog's body of the e-magazine called Entangled, which you can, or you must check out over at anthonypatch.com. Now, Anthony has formed such a great working relationship with the Kev Baker Show, and we couldn't be prouder of that because we're literally in a position now where we're ahead of the curve when it comes to topics such as quantum computing, D-Wave in particular, CERN, all the science kind of stuff that is so in all of our faces today, and I can't be prouder of that. And Tony, I thank you more and more every time you come back onto the show because we really are learning all the time and we're keeping our audience ahead of the curve. So welcome back yet again, big man.
Thanks very much. And Johnny, if we didn't start on Monday, would we start on Wednesday?
Do you know what, Tony, as soon as I said that, I says, well, state the obvious, Johnny, eh? Unbelievable.
Gotta pay attention when Johnny's talking.
Did you have a good weekend, Tony? Refresh the batteries after a brilliant show on Friday with Dane Wiggy?
Well, you squeezed me. You squeezed me for an hour and a half on Saturday, creating another video, and this one about CERN. Oh, come on. What can you talk about CERN? No, we had a great time. I just wanted to let people know real quick. We did it on my channel on YouTube. I downloaded at least 10 conversations, 10 shows that Kevin and I have done together, kind of an information dump, and I would encourage people to go take a look at that if you want to sort of go back into time with us, so to speak. People have kind of lost track of me for some reason because I haven't been on YouTube since September. So indicative of that and in concurrent with it, Kev was nice enough to invite me Saturday to spend an hour and a half with him going through the graphs, going through the technical stuff, the nuts and bolts of D-Wave, and diffusing some of the misunderstandings and the hype that are out there in YouTube land about the graphs that are produced in public on the CERN website. But yeah, thanks very much, Kev. You have really stepped up the information flow. You and I and Johnny are at the tip of the spear of what's going on, and you sent me a really excellent article today that we're going to go over, the 5 of 5 out of IBM.
Yeah, this was something I came across, and I'm really enjoying looking into artificial intelligence. I really am. I find it thoroughly interesting. So it's half the battle doing the research for these shows. And when we're listening to any kind of presentations on artificial intelligence right now, one name that keeps on coming at us, and it's even, we've got the Wimbledon Tennis Championships started today in the UK, and IBM's Watson is playing a massive part in that. So I went to the IBM website today, and I came across this article. It says, "The Power of Thinking Big. IBM's Researchers 5 in 5. And it opens up by saying, "Great scientific leaps rarely happen incrementally. They often come from setting big, ambitious goals that move discovery forward. Think of the Wright brothers' determination to fly, President John F. Kennedy's pledge to put a man on the moon, or IBM researchers' resolve to build a computer that could understand spoken language and beat the greatest human champions on Jeopardy. The bigger the goal, the greater the impact on society. This approach has been a hallmark of IBM research since our founding more than 70 years ago, and it is responsible for many world-changing inventions. In that spirit, today we are renewing our annual 5 in 5 predictions about 5 technologies that we believe have the potential to change the way people work, live, and interact during the next 5 years. Now, there's obviously 5 of these technologies here, and one I want to start with is to do with hyperimaging. And it says hyperimaging and AI will soon give us superhero vision. In 5 years, our ability to, quote, see beyond visible light will reveal new insights to help us understand the world around us. This technology will be widely available throughout our daily lives, giving us the ability to perceive or see through objects and opaque environmental conditions anytime, anywhere. And bearing in mind, just the other night, we opened up a conversation about colours and artificial intelligence. This one jumped out at me, Tony, and all 5 of them that we're probably going to run through here, it's quite scary stuff at times, it really is. So IBM's Watson, Tony, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, you put out a great promo video just before the show where you went through this article, and I encourage people to go to Kev Baker's channel on YouTube and watch that short video because you do a great job breaking this down. I cut you off when you were about to talk about last Friday's guest, Dane Wigington, the premier researcher in geoengineering, geoengineering.org, and he's talking obviously about the atmospheric spraying amongst many other aspects. So we're going to need hyperimaging just to see the sun.
That's very true. But I mean, we're seeing these 5 technologies here. And when you read this hyperimaging, what jumped out at you?
Well, when we talk about the visible light spectrum, we're obviously talking about a narrow range within the overall electromagnetic spectrum. And we're so limited as human beings as to what we can actually see using our sensors, those 2 little things in our skull that accept photons and the frequency and wavelength of visible light. And what we talked about last week as an introduction, and we're going to kind of build today, and then Wednesday we'll put another building block to this discussion of color. Going back just one step to Newton that we mentioned last show, he categorized in the electromagnetic spectrum 3 colors, the primary colors, red, green, and blue. And he stopped there in terms of mathematically placing equations as descriptions as to the construct of those wavelengths of visible light, and also the geometric representation of just red, green, and blue. And if you combine those colors, you end up with black. Now, when you combine these other colors I'm about to mention, which are pastels, you combine pastels and you end up with green. The pastels result not from using a prism and splitting the wavelengths of light into the primary colors as Newton did. The pastels actually exist in a boundary layer between light and dark. And it isn't so much a shadow as it is actually pastel colors. The shadows don't really come into play until you get in closer to this amorphous, shape-shifting area of electromagnetic wavelengths that we see as pastel colors. And as you get in really close, then it loses its context. Those pastel colors diminish down into gray and eventually to black. So what you're looking at here is a completely different foundation as to how you look at our visible world. There's the Newtonian, very much like an Einstein model, versus the pastel or Goethe model, which we could perhaps put alongside the Tesla model of the universe that we've talked about so much. So that's the summation of it right there. Go ahead.
You know, I'll bring Johnny in here as well. I mean, IBM Watson, Johnny, it's talking here about us being able to have the ability to perceive or see through objects and opaque environmental conditions anytime. We've spoke about this kind of thing where you can see through objects, and it sounds almost like augmented reality's coming, Johnny.
It doesn't. The thing about that, Kev, I always look at the weird side of it, maybe side effects of this kind of thing. You could imagine that if people were able to see, like it was like a superhero can see. You can imagine, Kev, a lot of people going for that, and then all of a sudden there's car crashes everywhere, and there's too many people with these eyes that are perfect being killed by people that are, say, get normalised. Will it end up that people with normalised won't be able to drive anymore? Is that the kind of thing? Because it just seems to me that I don't see why we should be messing with our own eyesight. I don't see why we need machines, chips, and nanotechnology to make us see any better. I really don't see the benefits. I only see it for somebody that's never been able to see before or lost his sight. That's it.
This goes into the kind of controversial area of enhancing the humans, Tony. And there was a very, very big computer game that was out just recently. It was the latest version of the Deus Ex franchise. Huge computer game. The kind of underlying storyline in that was society breaks into two camps. There's those that are still normal humans and an enhanced segment. They augment themselves with this technology as well, Tony. Do you see that being a real danger that we face in the near future with bio-enhancements that are now quite openly talked about?
Yeah, the bio-enhancements, the augmentation, I see as another sense or sensors that you need to exist in the digital reality of the sentient world simulation. This digital reality that Pokemon Go has introduced us into, that the greater field of computer games within the consoles is preconditioning and programming people to actually demand to live in that augmented digital reality rather than the augmented. So people are being conditioned to really want to exist in this augmented reality, both as their bodies being augmented as well as the reality of the world itself. So if you're seeing beyond visible light, it's because you're operating in a digital environment, and it's necessary to see in those different spectrums of light. But let's go back in time. We're looking forward. Let's go back in time. About 18 months ago, you and I were talking about how augmentation would become fashionable as one way of sucking people into eventually demanding the augmentation. And then that second class, let's say it's the elite, let's say it's the wealthy who benefit from the augmentation because they can afford it and they're allowed access to it, looking down their nose at those that are not augmented or have limited augmentation. There will be a group that will be pushed out of the sentient world simulation, the digital world, because they refuse the mark of the beast.
And you know, I think we're on the cusp of that, because we've even had Peter Thiel the entrepreneur, and he's somebody that we listen to quite a lot. We listened to an interview not that long ago by him, and he's basically saying now that excuse me, the smartphone, the technology there has basically reached the top of the curve, and they've gone as far as they can with that. And of course, the next step for me is offering up these enhancements. I definitely see as this is the way they're going to bridge kind of the world we're in now into this digital world.
I think we're really close to seeing implants to replace our handheld phones.
Yeah, I can see that. Absolutely. Now, another one of this list from IBM, this is another one that's going to affect us all, because it says here that with AI, Tony, our words will be a window into our mental health. In 5 years, what we say and write will be indicators of our mental health and physical well-being. Patterns in our speech and writing analysed by cognitive systems will enable doctors and patients to predict and track early-stage developmental disorders, mental illness, and degenerative neurological diseases more effectively. Now, the video I put out today was about DeepMind. They had done a deal with an NHS trust in England, and basically patients' data was being shared about willy-nilly, and there was a misuse of that data. But the thing is, Tony, they're using all of that data right now to build the models that will lead to a world where they're going to be able to analyse our words and diagnose our health. And this is where we get back to the morality and the ethical side of things, isn't it?
It is, and it's interesting and comical that they say 5 years, because this is going on with Facebook and other social media already. And the backup to that is DARPA, when they put out the request for a proposal for private sector to step up and meet their proposed projects, because that's what DARPA does, is they design a what-if scenario and say to public sector, can you build this for us? And this is what Facebook did and D-Wave and others. So when we talk about 5 years, that's nonsense. This is already going on, and the patterns right now are being used to teach the AI system what IBM calls, rather than AI, they call it cognitive, and they use it in their article here. And you and I have heard many presentations in which IBM says cognitive, and you never really, rarely ever hear the word AI. I think really IBM is behind the curve when you look at, in comparison, what D-Wave is doing. So just to put it in context, now there's a word they use in here, and you know they structure these articles very carefully, and they talk 5 years, and they're talking about 5 and 5 predictions. Well, the 5, the number has to do with the 5th age, and that's coming in September. That's the age of Aquarius. So another word is degenerative neurological diseases. What this does is smack at labeling people as degenerates, this class society, this separating out. This moves into the discussion of mental illness.
And what they can do is, I mean, we always talk about being put on lists. We could literally be looking at if the kind of thoughts and things we post on Facebook, they will be deemed as a neurological disease. That says easily, or that's the kind of ramifications that I see coming from something like this. But John, I'll come to you now, right? Because this is the question that I'm even struggling with. Because here we have a technology, forget it's artificial intelligence, because we tend to think of that in a negative light, but we've got a technology now that can literally look at every bit of data we've put out there on the internet, even watch what we're doing real time, and it's got the ability to prevent disease, predict it. Obviously a good thing, right? But where do you draw the line, Johnny, at it being very intrusive, your privacy, stuff like that? Do you think the benefits of that predicting health problems outweigh the privacy concerns? And it's not a trick question, John. It's something that they must be struggling with right now when they're even creating these AIs.
Well, that's the thing about it. It's like a double-edged sword, kid, because nobody wants to see anybody unwell. And anything that can stop it is an absolutely fantastic idea. But it is the intrusion, and I think you have to look at that as well, because it's too intrusive. I mean, it can tell by what you're writing. Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing, Kev. That's gone past the intrusive mark. I don't even know if there is a name for that, because that smashed that barrier.
It's like I said in the video, Tony, privacy, it's like a Mandela effect. It's something that some people remember, but it definitely doesn't exist on this timeline anymore. And what's your thoughts on this, Tony? Because, I mean, we do love the technology side, but it's in the hands of Satanists, right? So your thoughts on kind of, should they be doing this for us too intrusive?
If it was coming from the benevolent origins, I would say, march on, dudes. Let's do it. Let's solve all the problems of the world, but let's do it in the context of God as the creator, not sidestepping. This is all Satan trying to break through the code, break through the communication that occurs in prayer between those that are saved and with Jesus Christ and have the Holy Spirit. This is the coding, whether you're talking about sensors that see, sensors that hear, those that feel and smell. Those are all coded communications, and Satan doesn't have access to our prayers. He doesn't know what it is that we're saying between us and Jesus Christ. That's just one slice of it. But what I want to say is that this is not being used for benevolent purposes. This is, again, my old, used car salesman scenario where they're going to sell you a bill of goods and you get down the street and the transmission drops out of your car. This is being sold as a palatable, benevolent package, when in fact this is all intended to control us, to separate us from God, to separate us from that coded communications, and it is to plug us into an artificial reality that we've often cited as the hive mentality. And in fact, with this article, its tab with the name The Power of Thinking has the B symbol attached to it. It's right in front of our faces, and they're laughing and mocking at those that don't know any better, that what they're putting forth through these 5 areas of technology they're highlighting in this article is all meant to plug people into the hive mentality. So this is nefarious. This could be used for so much good, but it won't be. The limited access to this for benevolent purposes will be to those select few who will benefit from the technology, the rest of the technology being applied to the masses of humanity to control them and destroy their connection to God.
And Tony, at the weekend there, I like to unplug, or I try to unplug, right? And myself and Anne, we sit down, we decide to watch a movie. So we watch The Fast and the Furious. I'm thinking it's cars, it's racing. There's not going to be anything in there for me, right? So the movie's moving along nicely, and then they're trying to track somebody down. Now, I don't really watch these Fast and Furious movies. I think this is the 7th or 8th one. I was finding it highly entertaining. And then all of a sudden, to track somebody, they pulled out something that they referred to or gave the name to God's Eye. Now, this God's Eye was basically the Hollywood representation, and very, very similar to what we talk about here on the show, of the sentient world simulation. This thing had the ability to track absolutely anyone on the planet, anywhere, anytime, to the point where they could predict where they were going. It doesn't matter how much you try and unplug from everything that's going on. It's in our face everywhere now, Tony. This is a technology that they've gotten. Again, Hollywood mocking God, the fact they call it God's Eye.
Yeah, it's in everything. And, if you have the eyes to see it and the ears to hear it, it's everywhere. You actually cannot cut yourself off from it. Once you know, you're going to always know, and you're going to see it embedded in everything. And we talk about the Internet of Things, the Internet of everything being turned into a sensor and a data transmission point, feeding the sentient world simulation, which is operated by the cognitive systems, the AI systems. And now the next section here is medical labs on a chip will serve as health detectives for tracing disease at the nanoscale. New techniques that detect tiny bioparticles found in bodily fluids will reveal clues that when combined with data from the Internet of Things will give a full picture of our health and diagnose diseases before we experience any symptoms. Sounds all well and good, but what you extract out of this is the fact that they're monitoring your bioparticles. They're monitoring your DNA.
Sounds like they're going to be putting a chip in us all. We'll be back after the break. Don't go anywhere.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kev Baker, and this is the second half of tonight's broadcast of the Kev Baker Show, right here on the only talk network that matters. It really is. truthfrequencyradio.com. We are raising the bar when it comes to alternative media. I don't say that lightly. And of course, you can be listening to us over on iHeartRadio, TalkStream Live, TuneIn Radio app, wherever you are. A massive warm welcome. And tonight we're having another great conversation with author, researcher, and public speaker, fellow host on the network, Anthony Patch. You can find his work over at anthonypatch.com. And Johnny, before we get started again, my mum, she's really enjoying this show tonight, and it kind of makes me smile because we share jokes often about the ZX81. Remember that computer, Johnny, back in the day?
Yeah.
Well, I remember my mum, it was the first computer she ever got me when I was young. It got me into it, probably turned me into a geek. I always used to remember saying to her, she would be laughing at the fact I get so excited about the consoles and things. That one day, all these computers, they'll all be talking to each other. And she used to laugh, you know, and here we are today. And to see my mum now, she's like in a gadget grand, Johnny. She's got the iPhone 7. She's on Skype. She's right with it. It's crazy times, dude.
Oh, it's great. I mean, I like that factor because that way, I mean, it's really easy to keep in touch with your family that way. Talking about the ZX81, Kev, do you know I paid £70 for a 16K RAM pack?
16K, I bet you felt like Bill Gates at the time, Johnny.
Oh, wow, I thought that was it. That was me. I didn't need anything more.
Now we're moving into a world with quantum processing units, quantum memories, quantum computers, and the man that keeps us abreast of all of that is Anthony Patch. Tony, we're back for part two. Before the break, you were bringing up these micro or medical labs on a chip, and during the break we were talking about it's definitely beyond the line, asking people to take these medical chips. And all of this information, be it the medical chip, Internet of Things, smartphones, every bit of data we're giving up freely right now. We've spoke about the sentient world simulation before, and there's one of these segments, one of these 5 and 5 from the IBM Watson website that really smacks of sentient world simulation. And it says here, macroscopes will help us understand the Earth's complexity in infinite detail. The physical world before our eyes only gives us a small view into what's infinitely interconnected and complex world. Instrumenting and collecting masses of data from every physical object, big and small, and bringing it together will reveal comprehensive solutions for food, water, and energy needs. Now tell me that doesn't sound like a sentient world simulation, Tony.
I'm going to get on my pedestal for about 5 minutes, so go get yourself a scotch on the rocks. Okay?
Love it. Go for it.
Here's the deal. You and I and Johnny have been talking forever about the sentient world simulation, and I know there's people out there that have just been going, oh, come on. Despite the fact that we post in chat, I write articles citing the actual articles out of Purdue University. We put the evidence out there, and people still say, yeah, sure, maybe it's 20 years in the future, but I'm not going to worry about it today. Okay, well, this article came out in January, right from IBM. They're talking about macroscopes. They described the exact definition of the sentient world simulation for us. So it's right out there. Again, you know, we're blowing our own horn, but you know what? So what? We're going to blow our own horn here, the three of us, because we put in a lot of time and effort into researching. This is our life. We are fully immersed in the research. For you guys as the audience, Okay? For your benefit. We could keep it to ourselves. We could have Skype conversations between the three of us and just say, yeah, this is pretty neat stuff. Yeah, the world's going to hell in a handbasket. Oh, well, and never share that with anybody. But we're doing this for your benefit. Now, I'm going to back up just a little bit, and we're going to break this down. We have spent a lot of time talking about AI, how it learns, and the nuts and bolts components, using the game world to teach AI in the first generations using graphical processing units, GPUs, in the game consoles. Now they're using quantum bits. They're using quantum processing units. We broke this weeks ago. They still haven't brought it out as we're seeing in an article like this from IBM, but it will, believe me, because we keep bringing you the tip of the spear information. And later on, they finally catch up with admitting what Kev and I are looking to the future and seeing through their own information. We're just reading it and breaking it to you long before they do it to the masses. So quantum processing units, you're taking out of the game console this form of teaching the AI, this feed forward process of AI deep machine learning into the recursive neural network that occurs within the quantum processing units. So the game consoles have done their thing. Anybody who talks about game consoles and deep machine learning is stuck in the Model T paradigm. Kev and I are over here in the quantum processing unit of the Boltzmann machine. That is the machine. It is a statistical machine, but the Boltzmann is the new model, the new sheriff in town. And in my Entangled magazine, in the July issue that just came out of Entangled, I break down definitively the Boltzmann machine and deep machine learning and AI and tell you exactly where it's at the tip of the spear. So if people want to detract from what we're talking about and saying this is hyperbole, conjecture, conspiracy theory, sorry guys, time after time after time, we are proven correct. If you want to read in detail beyond what we're able to present here on the radio, get into the Entangled magazine and you'll see the real information. And not just from me. I think we have at least 10 other contributing authors this month. So we have some very knowledgeable people in their own specific areas of research that are bringing you cutting edge information. This is not a sales pitch. I'm just telling you where you can find more information that's of benefit to you. And this is not, saying the world's coming to an end, the sky is falling, that kind of nonsense. But I'm giving you the progression with Kev and Johnny of the technology and where we see it leading to.
And this Boltzmann machine, Tony, it's nothing actually new. It's quite an old idea.
It's
is. Just the fact that nobody is putting two and two together, despite the fact that when you go looking out there, this is the kind of stuff they're talking about. They're talking about D-Wave and Boltzmann in the same articles. It's not that we're anything special or we've got any inside track. It's just nobody else is putting these data points together.
They're not taking the time to study deeply and to look at these deeper aspects of what's going on in technology. They're just snatching headlines, putting it out there and monetizing things on YouTube to, generate a bunch of money, but they're lazy. They're lazy. They don't bother to do the research that we're doing. So that you as the audience, we have a very sophisticated core audience that has stuck with us show after show. We have the same people, and we do have a growing audience. And that's the purpose of YouTube and Facebook for us. We're taking their technology and doing a 180 on it and using it for benevolent purposes to get this information out to as many people so that they'll come to the show and get more leading edge, because the latest breaking news, your access to it is right here on TFR with Kev Baker and Johnny Whistles and myself.
Definitely is. And Whistles, all this talk of quantum computers and things, you're like me, man. You love all this geeky side, but it's a strange world we're moving into now, John, isn't it?
Oh, it isn't that. It's going to be a culture shock, really, to a lot of people, because some of the things that are coming out, Kev, and some of the things that probably the only the elites will get. It's just amazing. I just wish it was just for the benefit of mankind, but these things are never ever for the benefit of mankind. I always seem like they want to put it all down, do you know what I mean? But I don't mean to sound like that. It's just that I always have to look at the other side of these things.
Exactly. Wouldn't it be nice, Tony, if we could think about these technologies with excitement and all the good they could bring us? It's always the same thing we come back to. It's in the hands of Satanists.
It is, unfortunately, and again, that goes back to our discussion of color and light and dark and Newton and the three primary colors. You know, think about it this way. The basic construct of computing, going way back into DOS, that's the best way I can represent it, or C prompt, C3 programming, is binary based upon the basic foundation of Newton and others. But let's focus on Newton because he looked at and focused on only three colors. If they are stuck in the foundational construct of computing in three primary colors as their basis for how they view the world in the world of science, they've cut out all the pastels. Now, this isn't just color. I'm talking about information. I'm talking about the greater perspective of what God has created. They have self-limited themselves into a very narrow spectrum. You can call it the electromagnetic spectrum if you want, but their slice of life, their slice of reality has been self-limited by their design of their foundation of how science is conducted, how research is conducted. It is so limiting. They can't see the whole picture. They don't have the eyes to see and the ears to hear because they don't have all of the sensory input that would come. As an example, as an analogy, they don't see the pastels. They don't have the same information that we are privy to. They don't have access to the encoded information that we do. And they are desperate to destroy us because of that. They are desperate to crack our RSA coding, but they're not going to get it because God's not going to allow it.
And we often hear about quantum communications. Being a sci-fi geek, I love even thinking about it, but there is a quantum communication that exists right now. And I've loved the fact you've brought this up, Tony, because it's a really interesting train of thought. And for me, it's very, very relevant because you describe prayer as basically quantum entanglement, quantum encrypted communication. And when you talk about the fact that they're trying to crack that, it makes a lot of sense to me. It really does. And I'd like you to speak to that again so the audience can kind of hear you reiterate what you're saying about that.
Yeah, quite literally, with a good friend of mine, we've been having some discussions lately about this concept of using the analogy of RSA encryption communications. You and I can't talk today. The encrypted communications as a analogy for prayer, because when we pray to Jesus Christ, our intercessor between us and God, the Creator, we are actually quantum entangled with him. And I mean this because our brains, we have proven, are quantum computers. And we've broken that down and shown everybody definitively that our brains are quantum computers. They're the warm and wet qubits. And we are quantum entangled with Jesus Christ in that communication in the form of that still small voice as it's described in Scripture. Understand that in the world of man, they use a code, they use a key to secure communications. Well, God goes way beyond that. This is what Satan's trying to do. He's trying to copy God's construct. He is trying to create for man encrypted communications, but it's so limited in comparison to what God has created. The only key, the only access to God's encrypted communication between us and Jesus Christ is through prayer and ultimately through the Holy Spirit giving us that key to maintain that line of communication. So I love to use the technology and flip it as a 180 and say, this is the analogy, this is the evidence of what God does. If you think the technology is wondrous and supernatural and all this whiz-bang, phenomenal sensors and IBM and everything else we're talking about, think about what God has created that Satan's trying to copy.
Absolutely. And, that's a good segue, Tony, because you sent me an article and it was all to do with photosynthesis. Now, I used to love biology when I was in school. I'm sure that isn't a surprise to anyone out there, little geek boy that I am. But one of the most fascinating processes in the natural world for me is photosynthesis. The fact that plants can take light and they can transform that and convert that into energy, absolutely amazing. And even as a young guy, I used to wonder, well, why don't we kind of mimic that in the real world? Little did I know that's exactly what these scientists always try and do. And it's something that you utilized as well in one of your books when it was quite an interesting take on a submarine that you had, Tony. Do you want to talk about that?
We don't oftentimes talk about my first two books, the novels, Covert Catastrophe and 2048 Diamonds in the Rough. So we're sort of blowing our own horn today. I'm going to continue with that thread. And in that, specifically, one thing I mentioned, I have a submarine that is built to mimic a manta ray, and it's 300-foot wingspan. One of the power systems for this is photosynthesis, and they use a New Zealand fern as the heart to pump green blood in this photosynthesis energy source process to power the submarine. And Kev is going to post some of those right now in chat. But it was interesting because Bill Gates just put out, or was quoted in an article just a couple of days ago, where he was saying that he thinks that photosynthesis can be used to produce methanol to power automobiles and other vehicles using methanol. Well, maybe Elon Musk will butt heads with him over that one.
And I'm just looking for these photographs here. I will post them in the chat room when
Sure.
I found them here, Tony. I've got them here. But, I was having a laugh as well because even Skype now, they've got a little manta ray emoticon that you can use as well. And we're always laughing about how you're ahead of the curve. But how you beat Skype on that one, Tony, it's beyond me.
Yeah, it's funny. I published 2048 Diamonds in the Rough back in 2014. And my submarine, as I said, is a manta ray, and it's on the cover of the book. And now Skype is using a manta ray. Actually, it's a stingray, which is a smaller version, as emoticon. They listen to us. I think it's a joke. It could be that they're just kind of playing with us, but maybe we're just too full of ourselves, Kev. But I think they do listen to us. But there's a lot of stuff in those books that was, I'm going to say, was predictive. And there's still more technology in those books that's yet to be revealed to the public. I have a form of red crystals that came out of Denmark, out of a university in Denmark back in 2013, what I call DSR red. And these crystals actually absorb oxygen. They're red and then they absorb oxygen and turn black. These can be incorporated into a diver's mask. You don't need tanks. My characters use a diving mask of double wall construction with these crystals, and the crystals, when a laser light emitter strikes the crystals, it releases the oxygen. Now, this is factual. This is right out of the laboratory. I just put it into the storyline. But it can also be used to suck all the oxygen out of a room as a weapon, and I employ it as a weapon as well in this book.
Well, you just know that's what the military-industrial complex are always looking at anyway. But when it comes to this manta, this thing in the actual book, I always, it's a good idea when I love space, Tony. I'm convinced that there is a breakaway civilization out there somewhere already. And, you might imagine building spacecraft where the actual shell of the craft itself was taking in the harmful radiations from CMEs and stuff like that and able to convert those high energies and use that as some kind of power source. All that kind of stuff really fascinates me. It truly does.
Well, that's what the sun does. All of the stars absorb plasma from the universe. The medium, the conductive medium, the fourth state of matter, the ionized gas is actually drawn in through electromagnetism by the sun. And my good friend Monty Childs from the Sapphire Project in the laboratory has proven this to be valid, that it's actually drawing energy from the cosmos, drawing that ionized gas in. And that's what's, functioning as a propulsion system, an energy production system. It's actually an energy conductor. That's what the sun is. It's a conversion conductor. But there's no reason that spacecraft can't do the same thing, that they can take in the ionized plasma, the ionized gas, and use it as a fuel. There's no reason. You can use gamma rays and X-rays, which are throughout the universe and are much more powerful than the gamma rays that are produced by the synchrotron at CERN. And these are supraluminal. These are faster than the speed of light energy sources. So absolutely, there's an unlimited amount of energy that can be taken in to propel spacecraft.
You see, Johnny, we get one of them, we get a fully functional, friendly AI to fly the thing for us, and we're there, dude. Mars beyond, man.
Oh, count me in, Kev.
At least
It'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? Really.
We wouldn't have to give Elon Musk a couple of hundred knicker to get a kind of ride up to Mars. We'd be there before him. Now, talking of Elon Musk, it wouldn't be a Kev Baker show without me paying homage to the big man. What do you make of this tunneling thing that Elon's up to? We spoke briefly about his giga factories that he's building right now, but just the other day I seen that his boring company, I love his sense of humour, this is the tunneling kind of department that he's going into. They've just created their first tunnel. Now, he's got a dream, Tony, of instead of building up the way, maybe going underground with these tunnels. What do you make of that? I mean, do you think that's a innovative way forward with traffic, stuff like that, or has he absolutely lost the plot?
Well, if Boston with their Big Dig project is any example, I think it's a lost cause because it's a boondoggle. Now, we know with the discussion of deep underground military bases and hyper maglev trains traversing through tunnels in the United States and throughout the world, they probably already have done this, and I think it's a tongue-in-cheek on his part. I think he's really playing with us, and those of us that know about, these discussions of DUMBs and maglevs, he's saying, hey, yeah, we should be. And in fact, hey, guess what? We already have the technology. Oh, by the way, we're using nuclear-powered tunnel boring machines with lasers that convert the soil and the rock into glass to line the walls of the tunnels for maglev transportation. Oh, gee, I guess I should just come right out and just tell you that. That's what he's doing already. Yeah, he makes a big thing about saying, I don't believe in levels. In other words, skyscrapers. I believe in levels underground in the form of levels of tunnels.
That's where I always see the elites running off to. I don't see many of them getting off-world. Something catastrophic was to happen. But I imagine we'd see them crawling underground like the insects they are, Tony.
I think so, and those are their own tombs, because that's where they're all going to go and die.
Well, Johnny, we've always wondered about that, right? Because, being the fear porn progenitors that we are here on the Kev Baker Show, earth changes and cataclysms always come up, right? And we've always kind of speculated, why on heck's name would you build underground if you know something's going to happen like a mega earthquake? Surely that's going to entomb you, right?
Well, you would think so, Kev. I mean, it's like Yellowstone, Kev. Could you imagine that going off? I don't care. I don't think going underground either would help that either, because there'd probably be no light for I don't know how many years, and the air would probably be unbreathable. So I don't see what going underground would do. Even some massive mega earthquake, tsunami, you name it, Kev. Going underground's not a place to go.
Oh, it might not be the place to go, but I imagine they'd probably have places that could keep them for 20, 40 years at a time. Probably worth some of the money that's disappeared to over the years. Now, we're almost out of time, and Tony, we're going to be building on this conversation on Wednesday, but is there anything else you want to throw out there in the couple of minutes that's left before we leave tonight?
Yeah, it's just me being the preacher, and that is the solution is Jesus Christ. So we've talked about, geoengineering last week. We've talked about the idea of the advanced technologies that we've covered today, and none of that should really cause fear in people. I think really the best antidote to it, along with turning to Jesus Christ, is to laugh in their face. You know what Satan really cannot stand in his minions is joy and love. And if you really exhibit that because of the Holy Spirit, you have the joy in your life, Satan has no ability to affect you, and you take on the full armor of God. And Wednesday, we're going to start talking about supernatural weapons that you acquire through the Holy Spirit.
Oh, wow. And, you know, Bill Bean is one man who comes on the show, and he talks about having this spiritual armor and a spiritual sword. I mean, there's something when that man speaks. I tell you, he calls himself the spiritual warrior. For anyone out there that doubts there's like something going on beyond the veil, beyond what we can see, trust me, there is a whole other world out there, and some people are tapped into it. And I can't wait to find out more about this on Wednesday with Anthony. And don't forget, I want you all out there, I urge you all to check out Entangled. It's certainly not just about me and Anthony. There's so many people in there, so many articles, and it adds to the conversations that we have here with myself and Johnny and Tony. And watch out for more video updates as well. There's so much going on in the world right now, and it's great that we can take to YouTube in emergency circumstances, go and dispel any of the myths and rumours before they start, or bring you important updates that are very timely. So until tomorrow night, with myself and Johnny, we'll be breaking down the madness. Wherever you are, make it TFR.
And dinna touch that dial.
God bless you all. Go take a look at that if you want to sort of go back into time with us, so to speak. People have kind of lost track of me for some reason because I haven't been on YouTube since September. So indicative of that and in concurrent with it, Kev was nice enough to invite me Saturday to spend an hour and a half with him going through the graphs, going through the technical stuff, the nuts and bolts of D-Wave, and diffusing some of the misunderstandings and the hype that are out there in YouTube land about the graphs that are produced in public on the CERN website. But yeah, thanks very much, Kev. You have really stepped up the information flow. You and I and Johnny are at the tip of the spear of what's going on, and you sent me a really excellent article today that we're going to go over, the 5 of 5 out of IBM.
Yeah, this was something I came across, and I'm really enjoying looking into artificial intelligence. I really am. I find it thoroughly interesting. So it's half the battle doing the research for these shows. And when we're listening to any kind of presentations on artificial intelligence right now, one name that keeps on coming at us, and it's even, we've got the Wimbledon Tennis Championships started today in the UK, because we're literally in a position now where we're ahead of the curve when it comes to topics such as quantum computing, D-Wave in particular, CERN, all the science kind of stuff that is so in all of our faces today. And I can't be prouder of that. And Tony, I thank you more and more every time you come back onto the show, because we really are learning all the time and we're keeping our audience ahead of the curve. So welcome back yet again, big man.
Thanks very much. And Johnny, if we didn't start on Monday, would we start on Wednesday?
Do you know what, Tony, as soon as I said that, I says, well, state the obvious, Johnny, eh? Unbelievable.
Got to pay attention when Johnny's talking.
So did you have a good weekend, Tony? Refresh the batteries after a brilliant show on Friday with Dane Wiggin?
Well, you squeezed me. You squeezed me for an hour and a half on Saturday, creating another video, and this one about CERN. Oh, come on. What can you talk about CERN? No, we had a great time. I just wanted to let people know real quick. We did it on my channel on YouTube. I downloaded at least 10 conversations, 10 shows that Kevin and I have done together, kind of an information dump, and I would encourage people.
It really is. And, you know, just quickly, I mean, that Facebook thing you were talking about there, I used to be so engrossed in it, John. Really did. Posting my every movement, letting them track me all the time. But as I've kind of pulled back from Facebook with the health issues and stuff like that, it's only when you start using it less that you appreciate just how engrossed and enveloped you become in social media. And there's something quite toxic about that. There really is. We can probably do a show on that in the future. But tonight is Monday night, and of course we're joined by basically the third member of the team here on KBS now on a Monday and a Wednesday. We've got Anthony Patch. And for new listeners out there, Anthony has his own show here every Friday, 10 p.m. in the UK, and that's 2 p.m. on the West Coast, 5 p.m. on the East Coast, the Anthony Patch Show. He's the author of a number of books, including Covert Catastrophe, 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, Revising Reality, and he's also the editor, chief writer, and dog's body of the e-magazine called Entangled, which you can, or you must check out over at anthonypatch.com. Now, Anthony has formed such a great working relationship with the Kev Baker Show, and we couldn't be prouder of that. And IBM's Watson is playing a massive part in that. So I went to the IBM website today, and I came across this article that says the power of thinking big. IBM's researches 5 in 5. And it opens up by saying great scientific leaps rarely happen incrementally. They often come from setting big, ambitious goals that move discovery forward. Think of the Wright brothers' determination to fly, President John F. Kennedy's pledge to put a man on the moon, or IBM researchers' resolve to build a computer that could understand spoken language and beat the greatest human champions on Jeopardy. The bigger the goal, the greater the impact on society. This approach has been a hallmark of IBM research since our founding more than 70 years ago, and it is responsible for many world-changing inventions. In that spirit, today we are renewing our annual 5 in 5 predictions about 5 technologies that we believe have the potential to change the way people work, live, and interact during the next 5 years. Now, there's obviously 5 of these technologies here, and one I want.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. My name is Kev Baker, and you're tuned in to the Kev Baker Show, coming to you live on truthfrequencyradio.com. Another good weekend has passed there. My batteries are recharged. Looking forward to another hectic week right here on the show. Another week of live shows lined up, of course, for all of you great people out there. But I'm just one part of this team that makes up KBS, and I've got my co-host, Mr. Johnny Whistles, with me as well. And Johnny, you done absolutely brilliantly on Freaky Friday the other night, brother. I hope you've had a good weekend, man.
Thanks very much, Kev. Yeah, I had a great weekend. Spent it with Junie. I like to keep off, like yourself, Kev, I like to keep off the Facebook and things at the weekend. Give us a clear mind. And it's great because I had spent some quality time with June and June's wee grandson. So looking forward to the show, Kev. The Monday night show is always a great one to start the week.